Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Thank you, Cindy. My name is Howard, and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you for everyone who invited me to talk. Thank you for that. I'm honored to be here, and I want to welcome the newcomer and congratulate the CHIP people and the birthday people, particularly Noel for his 16 years and for the privilege of being his sponsor and giving him a cake. It's a privilege to sponsor people. It's an honor to sponsor people. Several of you have asked me to be your sponsors, and I don't think that a guy in AA could have a higher honor than that. That's a real, so I'm glad to be here. How many of you were at Brentwood last night at the beginner's workshop meeting? Yeah, I know it, but we'll do it again. I don't know what anybody's plans are for tomorrow night, but if you are, my advice is to stay away from Lark Ellen out in West Covina, because you've heard that speaker. I enjoy, and I've moved. I used to live here. I got sober in August of 1972 in Culver City. And I've known some of you since then. Tony, and by the way, you guys know Tony spelled backwards is why not? 20 years ago, Tony and I and a guy named Frank Giroux were as close as 7:59 is to 8 o'clock. Because Tony had 4 to 8 in the afternoon phone commitment at central office, and Frank Giroux and I had the 8 to 12. So for a year or so, we crossed paths, and he still enriches my life to know him. But I got sober in Culver City in 1972, and most of the time I have been very in this area. For part of the 1980s, I moved to Arizona. And last year we sold our house in Culver City and we moved back to Arizona. We live in Gilbert, Arizona. For those of you that don't know where Gilbert is, it is $200,000 southeast of Scottsdale. We have a wonderful life. I was a slow learner in AA as I look back on it, but from the very start my life got better. From the very start it was exciting, and AA has, and the meetings and this whole thing has enriched my life from the very first. And I haven't had in AA any bad experiences, except some of us, everybody passes away, and some of my best friends have. Frank Giroux was an example. I hope that I get to tell you a little bit about Frank. And I'm going to try to shorten my drunkalogue tonight. Now, whenever I say that, you can just bet that means we're going to have 45 minutes of solid drunkalogue. I will tell you, I feel good about my life, and I'm conscious of goodness. Basically, that's my experience. When I first wake up in the morning and I realize it's me, I feel good about that. And I anticipate a joyous day. My daughter and I got up early this morning and went to breakfast over in the valley, and then we went to a speakers meeting over there. I was not the speaker. And then we went to the zoo and walked. I just had a tremendous day today, and I anticipated we'd have a good day, and we did have. And always before I came to AA, and for a while after I came to AA, when I woke up in the morning, many times I was just totally despondent. I was immobilized with anxiety. I dreaded every day. It was just dreadful. And way before I started drinking, I felt bad about myself, and I felt bad about my life. And now, from where I'm at, I can look back and see there was a ton of goodness in my life. There was some bad, but there was a ton of goodness in my life then, and I could never see it or feel it. When the book says we lack the power, lack of power is our dilemma. I lacked the power to feel good. In and of myself, I just didn't feel good. What I did was feel rotten. And I felt rotten about everything. And from as early as I can remember, I was taught about God, for example, in a Methodist church. And in AA we come to believe, or we believe what makes sense to us. But I had a belief system imposed on me when I was a kid that didn't work. I was already isolated and self-centered. On the gnat, I was isolated and self-centered. And then the God I was taught about was a man, an anthropomorphic being, who was separate from me in a place called heaven. God, I know that they could have told me God was infinite, but what they told me was, that didn't mean anything to me. What meant to me was that God was a separate man off in heaven, and that somehow I believed he had created the universe and had thrown it out there like I'd throw out a snowball, and it was going along, and I was on it, and I was responsible for making it work. I had to do things, and I had to do it right. And 4 or 5 years old, and you got the entire responsibility for the universe on your shoulders. It's, and I was screwing it up left and right. And I didn't feel good about that. I didn't feel good about the kind of son I was. Hell, as a little kid, I was all right as a kid, but I didn't feel all right. And, when I was 4 or 5 years old, I went into the Baptist church one Friday afternoon. This is just a little town, had a bunch of churches. I'm not a Baptist. I shouldn't have been in the Baptist church, but the front door was open. And I just looked in, and the Baptists have ropes hanging down, and we didn't have that in the Methodist church. And I had seen a Tarzan movie, so I knew what the rope was for. And I got a hold of the rope, and I ran, and I swung on that rope, and bong, bong, bong. They had a damn barrel on the other end of that rope. That's no big deal. That's no big deal. No reason to even remember that. But I was sober a year in Alcoholics Anonymous before someone told me, Howard, if you've rung the bell, you cannot unring the son of a bitch. Just forget about it. I had never been able to forget about it. All this stuff I had never been able to turn loose of, and I didn't know I was hanging on to it. So when I was 13 years old and I drank my first bourbon whiskey and drank enough of it to do for me what it did for you, it just changed my life. All at once, I had the feeling, I had the sense of well-being. I could relax. It was the thing I had always wanted without even knowing that's what I wanted, and I knew I wanted it. And I got sick the first time I drank, and probably got sick the last time, and nearly every time in between, you know. But I could never see that drinking booze was the problem, because drinking booze was the solution. And there was trouble, you know, from 1950 to 1972. As a result of drinking booze, I spent a night in the Sharon Springs, Kansas jail, a weekend in the Dodge City County jail, 10 days in the Navy brig. I got into, I got married, and I kind of drove my wife crazy, and our kids were kind of like fawns in a forest fire. You know, they didn't know what the hell was going to happen next. And I, in 1960s, went to a therapist. I went to a psychologist for help, and I got it. He and I agreed that my dad was my problem. My dad had died in 1951. But he was my problem in 1962, and I'd drink to that. And I did. And I had, in 1972, I had had a convulsive seizure. A doctor had diagnosed me as having probable alcoholic neuropathy, and my boss had demoted me from supervisor to a position that reported to him on special assignment. And the last day of my drinking, he had cut termination papers on me, and he was going to fire me. I had left him no choice. But, you know, I look back on it kind of like Chuck C. used to say. I just went in to pick up my check and clean out my desk. And I told him, don't worry about me. I'm going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm not going to drink again, and I'm going to be all right. And he said, I hope you don't drink again, and I hope you don't get polio. I hope you don't break a leg. I hope nothing happens to you that's going to make you so much as late for work next Monday morning. Now you see, that's a wonderful thing. I had told this man every lie. I had worked him to death, and he was sick to death of me, and he had no confidence in me anymore, and I was gone. But I just told him I was going to AA, and he tore up the termination papers and gave me one more chance. Not because he had any faith in me. And he and I have talked about this many times since then. It was that somehow he thought Alcoholics Anonymous would help me if I would go. And he didn't want to lose me if I was sober, because he knew I had potential. And I had all of those things, and I called this guy and asked him if he would take me. Oh, and by the way, he didn't know about this yet. But I had found some equipment which he didn't know he had lost. I had an opportunity to sell some equipment that I didn't own, and I gave it to this third party to sell, and that certainly brought me to the realization that I'm going to have to stop drinking. You know, at least until this blows over. And so I called this guy in AA named Kenny Sixberry and asked him if he would take me to an AA meeting. And he said, "Are you drinking now?" And honestly, I wasn't. I had just finished a half a pint. But I'm not drinking now, you know. I fooled him because he said, "Well, try not to drink anymore." I drank at least 2, maybe 3 half pints more, and by then I was taking a lethal dose of whites every day, benzodrine tablets, and I'd probably taken 60 or 70 of those. So by 6 o'clock in the evening, I did not know what the hell I'd called AA for. Things are not that bad. I had things in much better perspective then, and I hope he didn't come, but he did come, driving a pickup truck, which was just what I figured he'd be driving. First thing I told him is, "I am not an alcoholic." And he said, "That's all right, we're going to the right place." And he took me to the Culver City Studio Group, and the first guy he introduced me to was this guy, Frank Giroux. And you'll meet Frank Giroux. The newcomers will meet Frank Giroux or Levon Giroux. And in AA, you'll frequently be told, "Stick with the winners." Well, this guy was a winner. And I didn't purposely, I don't think, do what I was told, but I did those things. They said, "Go to meetings." I went to meetings. They said, "Get a sponsor." I got a sponsor. I've always had a sponsor. And Kenny was my first sponsor. At that first meeting, you know, I look back and I really did, I listened like somebody would who already thought they knew it all. If you would have said, "Howard, you really think you know it all, don't you?" I would have said, "No, I don't." And my problem isn't that I know too much. My problem is I don't think well enough of myself. That's my problem. I know that. I need to think more of myself. But I'll tell you, I listened like somebody that thought they knew it all. And my brain thought of things like somebody who thought they knew it all. When they said, "Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful," I thought, cunning is not an attribute that you can assign to an inanimate substance such as alcohol. Cunning requires an intellect. Alcohol doesn't have an intellect. They have that screwed up. Then they said, "But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now." And God, I had no idea AA had to do with God. God wasn't my answer. And God this is a mistake. But then my mind said, they just got through saying alcohol was powerful, and now they say God has all power. Well, you cannot have it both ways. If God has all power, then alcohol doesn't have any. And if alcohol has power, God doesn't have all power. Now, when I'm thinking this, I'm missing stuff that could help me. You know? I had some wonderful people in my life all my life, and I had good things happening to me, and I could never, I had good people trying to help me. Not just my family, who always tried to help me, but I had school teachers, the superintendent of school, I had ministers, I had friends. The co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous in Sumner County, Kansas, when I was 17 years old, invited me to go to an AA meeting with him. I said, "Sure, Bill, what for?" He said, I had wrecked my car 4 times that summer, and he had the body repair shop, the auto body repair shop, and And I could not believe, once it dawned on me, he wanted me to go because he thought I drank too much. I couldn't believe that he thought that, But I had people trying to help me. Nearly all of them, it seemed to me, in their efforts to help me, had to pretty soon tell me what I was doing wrong. This is what's the matter with you. And I cannot hear, I'm just not capable of listening to that and benefiting by it. My mind would slam shut, and I would deny that what they said was true, and I would hate them for saying it. And I came to you guys. And seldom over the last 23 years have you guys told me what's wrong with me. Nearly always you tell me what's wrong with you. You tell me what you used to be like, what happened, and what your life is like now. You told me the first night that alcoholics were men and women who had lost the ability to control their drinking. That alcoholism is characterized first by an obsession of the mind, an obsessive belief each time we drink that this time it's going to be different. This time I'm going to control and enjoy it. Today I'm only going to have 2, 3 at the most. At 6:30 this morning, I'm going to start this half a pint, and I'm going to baby this half a pint of whiskey through the day. Monday, I'm just going to baby this half a pint of whiskey through the day. When I've had a half a pint of whiskey, I'm smarter. I really am. I was smarter. I felt good. It's just that the half a pint of whiskey was gone by lunch. And I would start thinking, I don't mean I'm going to drink exactly a half a pint of whiskey each day. I'm going to average a half a pint of whiskey. So I'll go get tomorrow's half a pint today at lunch. And I'll just take a drink out of tomorrow's half a pint because I'm not going to want a full half a pint tomorrow. By 3 o'clock, I'm into Wednesday's half a pint. And on Tuesday, I would get up with a hangover and I'd have to have a drink. But it's going to be, today I'm just going to drink this half a pint. I had that obsession. My mind wasn't capable of looking at the truth in terms of my drinking. My mind was only capable of believing this time it's going to be different. And they said coupled with that is a physical reaction that we experience as alcoholics to drinking whiskey that manifests itself into a phenomenon of craving for more. When I first heard that, I knew that I wasn't an alcoholic because, as I told Kenny at the break, I never craved a drink. See, I had seen Ray Milland in The Lost Weekend. Have you seen that? Now that's a craving, for Christ's sake, That's a craving. I never had that. He said, you mean if you would drink a half a pint of whiskey, you wouldn't crave another drink? And I said, no, I wouldn't crave it. I'd want it. He said, there's a kind of alcoholic that we haven't talked about yet, and that's the kind who, when he starts to drink, he keeps slugging them down so fast that the craving doesn't have an opportunity to set in. I got in the truck to go home with Kenny after my first meeting, and I said, I am an alcoholic, but AA isn't going to be for me. I don't want to do any of those steps. And I am not an atheist, but I am convinced that things happen in accordance with immutable law. It's a deterministic universe. Inherent in the immutable law is unlimited intelligence and power so that things happen exactly in accordance with the requirements of the law, and you can pray till your nose bleeds, and none of that changes. Nothing changes in order to accommodate people and their problems. You've just got to bite the bullet and go through it. And I don't want to drink anymore, but AA isn't for me. And I'm not going to do any of the steps. And he said, when you got into the truck, the first thing you said to me was, you are not an alcoholic. Now, after one meeting, you get into the truck and you say, you are an alcoholic, but there's nothing you're going to do in the steps. And there's no way for you to know it, but on page 30 in the big book, it says that when we fully concede to our innermost self that we are alcoholics, that is the first step in recovery. And he said, that's the way it happens. He said, that's the way it's happened for me for 8 years. I said, I don't want to do an inventory. I'm not going to make no list of this stuff I've done. And he said, well, don't worry about that. He said, I really have a good life. I've been sober next month for 8 years, and I haven't done that one yet either. He was just the perfect guy for me. He said, I should have. Don't do it the way I do it. But he said, I tell you, you can have a good life in 8 years of sobriety and not do it. Within a couple years, he did do it. But he said that it worked for him just that way. He comes to meetings and he listens, and if something doesn't sound good to him, he just leaves it. He said, I always try to feel respect for the person that's there. See, everybody that took a birthday cake tonight that was up here that looked so, man, you're looking good. Really great. These are the worst drunks in town when they're drinking, They get drunk. Read page 21 in the big book. It describes us perfectly. Get drunk at absolutely the wrong time. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Build up our family's hopes and then tear them down at absolutely, those people that were up here taking the cake, that's the way they are when they're drinking. And the way they are now is the way they are because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so he told me that if he heard something that didn't sound good to him, he left it. But he said frequently people will describe a problem that they have, and he says, I don't even realize that I have that problem until they describe it, and then they describe a solution. And the solution is appealing to me. And I try to make the solution part of my life. And he said, that has worked wonderful in my life. So he said, just don't drink and go and listen with an open mind. And I listened with as open a mind as somebody like me could. But when you already know it all, you listen with an open mind only to examine it with this superior intellect. It's not as easy. But I heard a lot of stuff that helped me. And my mind did pop off. I heard Archie Johnson say that success may be getting what you want, but happiness is wanting what you're getting. And I thought, well, he said we try to learn to live our lives in the now, and whatever's happening right now, including my talk, try to like that. Whatever's happening now, try to like that, because that's what's going to happen anyway. And not liking it just makes it worse. And my mind said, well, let's stick Archie in the eye with a sharp stick. Let's put this theory to test. Because that's what people that know it all think, And but it was raining that night, and I had hated the rain. When I was 3 or 4 years old, the first time I remember saying a prayer and knowing who I was praying to and why I was praying, I was in the Methodist church. It was the day before harvest, and we prayed for it not to rain so that the Kansas wheat farmers could harvest their crop. And that day, Sunday, it rained, it hailed, the wind blew, wiped out 90% of the wheat in Sumner County, Kansas. And I knew whose fault it was. I knew I was the guy that wasn't doing it right. You know, and I had not liked the rain since then. When I was in college, I took this class, and this is a terrific teacher who explained some of the things in the natural laws of physics that are involved in rain coming about, and it was clear to me that that process is far superior to the one they taught me in the Methodist Church. And I knew it rained in accordance with this immutable law, and that was good enough for me. And that helped me get away, which I needed to get away from the belief system that I had, because the belief system I had said you couldn't drink at all. It wasn't like the Catholic Church, where you can drink and confess and none of that. In the Methodist Church, they zap you right off the bat, you know, and you can't behave the way I was behaving and believe what I was believing, so I had to give up the belief. I couldn't give up the behavior. And so here I am in Alcoholics Anonymous, and Archie is telling me to like what I'm getting, and I get into the car and I think, you know, I hate the rain, but I think that's what Archie means. You know, it's going to rain anyway, and I became willing to love the rain. And it's that easy. It was that easy. By the time I got home and got in bed, the rain was on the roof and it was soothing, and I loved the rain. And then when I woke up, it wasn't raining, and I was disappointed, and I made the attitude adjustment, you know. And I have been trying to do that in my life, haltingly, for a long time, and it didn't dawn on me until much time later. As I look back on it, that was exactly what Kenny had told me to do. If somebody describes something that sounds like it worked, try it. And I was doing that. Ski from San Diego said that he was 36 years in learning that all the people that he hated didn't feel it. And it was killing him. Now, everybody ought to know that already. But that isn't what I knew. What I knew was these guys I hated had it coming. And this was something I was doing to them, what they deserved. And it never occurred to me that I was the one that wasn't sleeping at nights, you know, and they were. But when he said that, that made a ton of sense to me. And at the next meeting, when they said, anybody have a problem, I said, how do you stop hating people? And Patty Hicks was at that meeting, and she had 2 weeks on me. And she lorded it over me all the time. You know, you'll hear in AA sometimes people say their sponsor said, sit down, shut up, and listen. My sponsors have never told me that. Nobody has ever told me that except Patty Hicks. And but she said that night that everybody answered my question, how do you stop hating people? But her answer I remember, and it was, you can't be hateful and grateful at the same time. She said, I just heard that. And she said, the guy said that if you're sober alcoholic and you're not drinking today, then you have a basis for gratitude. And be grateful that you're not drinking. Whenever you start being hateful, just be grateful you're not drinking. That stuck with me, although how in the hell do you do that? You know, at the next meeting you could say, how do you do that? But I didn't. But I also told people I didn't pray. I said, I'll hold your hand to say the Lord's Prayer because I'm not in rebellion and I don't want to make a spectacle of this, and I will get it right. It's in earth as it is in heaven. It is not on earth. In the King James Methodist version of the Bible. But not that I like to be right, and not that I think I know it all. But But God don't change things in order to accommodate people in their problems. And this one guy said, okay, he said, I understand that not wanting to pray, but said, did you ever meditate? And I said, what's meditation? Isn't that prayer? And he said, well, read chapter 11 in the 12 and 12. And Bill, he said, describes a good way of meditating. And he said, I've tried that, and it really is a good thing to do for me. Well, I read that. And I think tonight I would say what Bill describes is a technique of contemplative meditation, where you bring the principles of the St. Francis of Assisi prayer into your consciousness in such a way that you add it to your belief system and the strength that comes with that. That's what I would say today. What I said then, I am not going to do this, you know. But I'm telling you, I had the worst anxiety attacks. Of course, I'm the only one that ever felt my anxiety attacks, but they were terrible. Just immobilizing anxiety. And I had it all day long. It was, and really the only way I could overcome these anxiety attacks was to be angry. Otherwise, I couldn't have pushed my way through it, except I'd just go through it angrily, and then I'd come to an AA meeting and get put back together. But I had a hard time, and so while I started meditating, and this is something, somehow I put what Bill Wilson had written, I put it together with Patty Hicks's thing about not being hateful and grateful at the same time. And I would remember I would sit quietly in the morning, I'd wake up, I'd get up, I'd make sure I was awake, then I would sit down and I would bring into my consciousness with as much clarity and honesty as I could just what the last 3 weeks of my drinking was like. Just how bad things were. And the character and quality of my life was disintegrating. It was crumbling. It was plummeting. And I couldn't face it. It was terrifying to me. I couldn't even talk on the phone. And the only way I could do anything was to drink. And when I drank, then I just made it worse. And there was no way of getting the toehold. And I would get that in my mind, and then I would look at what the last 3 weeks of my life was like in sobriety. My sponsor had helped me find the equipment that I stole, and I took it back, and they let me off the hook. The big crises of my life had been resolved through working the steps in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And regardless of how bad things looked, and I knew my anxiety didn't have much to do with what was in my life, it had to do with me. And but I could look at what the last 3 weeks of my life was like, and I could feel good, kind of grateful, you know, with a sense of optimism. And then it may not last 15 minutes, but I would do it. And then I'd stop doing it. And I heard a guy who was talking about the fact, and he's kind of an expert on alcohol and alcoholism. And he said that alcohol doesn't make you feel good. Alcohol is a sedative drug which sedates that part of your central nervous system which makes you feel bad. And when that part of the central nervous system is numbed out, you can relax and have a sense of well-being. But you get that good feeling in a manner analogous to burning that mechanism numb. And when the numbness wears off, it's in worse shape than it was before you drank. But you and I knew the answer. Don't stop drinking. And then you can do what I did, have convulsive seizures and all of this stuff, because the nervous system takes such a beating. But I listened to what he said, and that just one of those things you hear in AA. It didn't help me. I had anxiety attack, and I called this guy Frank Giroux, and I asked Frank. I would call him. I would call him regularly when I had an anxiety attack because he could help me out of it. And my sponsor worked, and Frank was retired, so Frank was available. And I talked to him, and he could talk me out of it. But this day, when I told him what my problems were, he said, "It sounds like you really are in trouble." And I thought, I didn't call you to hear that, you know. I wanted you to convince me I'm not in trouble. And he said, "No, you're in trouble, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll say the Serenity Prayer with you." And I said, "Frank, you know what I think about prayer. I don't want to do that." And he said, I said, "Why do you want me to do that?" And he said, "Because you need a sense of well-being if you're going to face life's responsibilities. And you used to drink whiskey to get that, and you can never do that again. But in AA, we work the steps, we go to meetings, and we say the Serenity Prayer. We do a lot of stuff in an effort to have a sense of well-being. So I'll say the Serenity Prayer with you." And he had me mesmerized a little, and he had my mind open a little, because we said the Serenity Prayer. And when we said, "God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change," the voice inside me said, "God doesn't change things in order to accommodate people and their problems." But then another voice that had never spoke up before said, "God doesn't have to change anything to give you serenity. You have serenity deep down within you. You're just not tapped into it. God doesn't have to change anything to give you courage. You have courage. You're just tapped into fear and anger for your strength." And at that moment, I had the wisdom to know the difference. And I will tell you that I have not had an anxiety attack since then. That was a remarkable experience, and it convinced me, and one of the things is God doesn't need to change anything for me, you know. There are spiritual principles that we practice in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that if we practice them, changes our lives. That's just the way it works, just like taking an airfoil through the atmosphere. There's laws of aerodynamics that are going to make the plane fly. And God don't have to change anything. That's the way it is. And so in October of 1974, I read in the 12 and 12 that, and my time's up, but I read in the 12 and 12 that sooner or later we have to learn that we have to stop using our higher power as some kind of a bush league pinch hitter. And I knew that's what I was doing. And I made a commitment to myself that there wouldn't be a day go by in my life when I didn't spend at least 30 minutes in contemplating my conviction about my higher power and how it is in my life, and improving my conscious contact with it. Over the years, when I was 10 years sober, I really started working to convince myself. Now, the book says in 3 different places, faith without works is dead. And for me, faith with works is dead. It takes more than faith. It doesn't say, I came to have faith that some power greater. It says, I came to believe. And a belief is an emotional conviction that something is true. And that conviction didn't come easy to me. I had to surrender a lot of knowing it all. I had to surrender a lot of resistance in order to for my own self, be certain, as it says in the book, that there's an all-powerful guiding creative intelligence underlying the material world and life as we see it. That nothing exists outside of this all-powerful guiding creative intelligence. I can't convince anybody else of that, and I don't have any interest in convincing anybody. I think it's impossible. But I have convinced myself. And so I hold that conviction in my consciousness for 30 minutes every day between, let's say, 6:30 and 7 o'clock in the morning. And if you do that for a long enough period of time, between 10:30 and 11 o'clock, if it gets rough, you can do it a lot better. And so I end up waking up in the morning feeling good about my life. I really have a good life. In the book on meditation, it says, whatever way you find God is the right way. If you think God out and you find God, that's right for you. Or if you just experience it. And both of those things have happened to me. I have experienced knowing it intuitively. And anyway, it then says, wherever you see God pass, mark that spot and go sit in that window again. And the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is my window. That's where I saw God pass. And I believe God is in everything that exists in the universe. But I'm not as conscious of that as I am in the morning when I'm being conscious of it or when I'm in an AA meeting. I'm always conscious of it in an AA meeting, and I'm grateful to you guys for meeting with me for that. Thanks a lot.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.